Welcome to the Doctoral Student Support webinar, How to Convince Yourself to Doctoral Completion with Scott Burrus. Dr. Burrus has served as USU's Provost since 2019 and has worked for nearly 3 decades in higher education. You're probably not going to be surprised that his primary research interests lie in predictors of online doctoral student success, and Dr. Burrus has worked with other university leaders to recently obtain approval for USU's first doctoral program. Scott, welcome to tonight's webinar.
Thank you, Heather. Happy to be here.
Tonight, you're going to be talking about how thoughts, beliefs, words, and actions can either work for you or against you in a doctoral degree program. And knowing a little bit about your background, I'm guessing you're going to start by sharing your story.
Yes, thank you. This is obviously a topic that is near and dear to my heart, something I can, talk about for quite a while, but I'll attempt to keep it brief. So my background is I obtained my master's degree in applied psychology in the early mid-90s. Initially thought I'd go into counseling, but after a year internship, realized that wasn't for me and kind of fell into social policy research and program evaluation and kind of realized I could make a difference in the world by serving others, serving my community, serving the planet and the universe, by understanding how things work and how to inform best practices, and decided to go the path of research. That led me to enter into a doctoral program that was located in San Francisco, where I was living at the time. But it was one of the first doctoral programs to have a regional, called at the time, regional accreditation for distance learning type programs. Back in the day, you'd come on ground a few times a year, then you would, meet with your chair and your committee, then go do your work in the field and come back. It was that kind of process. You'd actually mail in hard copies of things. So it was actually a pretty rigorous program, and it was really grounded in the notion of affecting social change through research. So I was doing that at the same time of working with others to run a social policy research firm in Portland, Oregon, where we received millions of dollars worth of grants to look at a variety of social issues, work with community organizations. I was traveling all over the country, often 60 to 20 trips a year to serve various grants that I was working on. And I also had a young family. So I had young girls that I was parenting at the same time while trying to do all of this. And at one point, it just got to be too much, I thought, for myself. And I ended up withdrawing and became ABD. And, always sort of, had this lingering belief that I wasn't enough. I couldn't do it. I had so many things going on. There were all these limiting beliefs that were creating a narrative that kept me from going to the path of completion. And I finally found a way to re-engage in this process. And through, some mentorship, as well as some inner work that I did, began to find that, in fact, I did have what it took. Instead of turning all the I can'ts and the no's, and having those play the narrative, I turned those limiting beliefs into empowering beliefs through a very sort of step-by-step, simple approach that led me to the point where in my early 30s, I was able to complete my PhD in psychology.
Okay, so let's unpack a little bit of what you said there. You used the term ABD. We may have students listening who aren't familiar with that. So do you want to describe how far you had come into the program?
Yeah.
How far you had progressed before you decided time out, you needed a break?
Yeah, so I had gotten to the point where I had completed my coursework, and I'd essentially reached, this institution I was at required 3 massive comprehensive essays. One on ethics, one on research methods, and then one on the topic. They were almost 3 mini dissertations or doctoral projects that you then had to orally defend to move into the doctoral research project or dissertation process. So I had gotten to the point where I was about ready to do those comps and felt overwhelmed and was like, I'm not doing this. And because after comps, which could then be a 6-month process approximately, there was another 1.5 to 2 years that I had in front of me because that's how that institution worked its dissertation, or doctoral process. So so ABD meant all but dissertation. So I had completed my coursework, but that next phase of completing what seemed at the time this massive project is when I stopped out. The irony is because of the work I was doing, I was writing, quote, dissertation like reports, many of which that were ended up being longer than my dissertation. I was writing those on a regular basis. Every couple of months, I'd come out with something. So on the externally, somebody could look in and say, if anybody could do this, you could do it. And yet I still have that internalized belief that I couldn't do it.
And it may be news to some students, or maybe it's not, that this stage in the process, ABD, is when research finds people do drop out. It's this psychological sense of overwhelm where really that imposter syndrome often comes in. Can I really do this? You were busy, like many of the people watching this video, but you said that you turn things around with a simple process.
Yeah. So I think that process basically took 2 steps. Step 1 was I began to journal in earnest, even just a little bit every day, just a few minutes, and began to ask myself questions. What is it that I want? Why do I want those things? And through that process of actually taking pen to paper and letting my brain work through what those limiting beliefs were and turn those limiting beliefs into what I could see was the truth, that again, I began to, question, oh, I can't do this. Well, why can't I do this? I don't have the time. Well, I do have the time if I carve out from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock every night after work, stay in the office, commit for a period of time. I'm going to come home 2 hours later, which is what was needed for me. That's not for everybody. Again, working through that journaling, each limiting belief was, I would disabuse myself of those beliefs to the point where I had a list of reasons that I could do this.
So you mentioned you stayed in the office an extra 2 hours in the evening. And one thing that we've been hearing on some of the other webinars is how important it is to understand when you're at your cognitive best. So for some people, that might be getting up earlier if time is the issue. We've heard a lot of suggestions about changing division of responsibility within your home, maybe even changing division of responsibility in a workplace. So really getting creative. For you at work, I'm going to stay 2 hours extra at work, and that resolved that belief of I don't have time. But my suggestion is to students out there that are saying, I'm wanting to give up. I'm thinking this is going to be impossible because I simply don't have the time. Get creative and for sure get your tribe involved. Those who are close to you in creating the solution, because I'm going to assume here that your wife had to agree to this
Right.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to, get all those things in place that, this is something that's going to change future trajectory. And it's worth it to have that short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain. And it ended up working out fine. The time that I did have was more concentrated, focused, and quality, rather than just say coming home and changing into my PJs and turning on the news. And I began to find that those 2 hours weren't really that much of substance. So it turned out it wasn't that much of a sacrifice.
So the two that I hear most at this stage are time, which we've just talked about. And then the second is, things are so different. I took the classes, I was able to get an A, my writing seemed okay, but now I'm at the point where I'm writing the actual applied doctoral project or dissertation. I'm getting this feedback, and now I'm starting to doubt my ability to do it. So any suggestions for the limiting beliefs about, I just don't think I can do this?
Yeah. So that leads me to the second thing. The first thing I mentioned was journaling. The second thing was meditation. The meditation practice became important because I found that by quieting myself, I began to better hear the truth that was inside of me. And so instead of having all this noise and distractions come in, I began to feel a sense of calm and assurance that I could and would do this. So I think all of us have some self-doubt. I have yet to meet any person who doesn't experience self-doubt in some way on something, even the most assured, confident, and successful that enters in. But what I found is for those that are able to move forward with a quiet confidence are those that do take this time to do that inner work, that have that focus, to have that period of calm. Even if it's for just 5 minutes in the morning, it makes an incredible difference to be able to clear the cobwebs and have a foundation to move forward with some quiet confidence.
So let's talk about meditation a little bit more, because I know there's probably some people out there, as soon as you said that word, they tuned you out. We've got a whole nother group who are saying, I've tried it, it doesn't work, I'm terrible at that.
Yeah.
I personally like to call this stillness practice because sometimes the word meditation is very loaded for some people. But I would love for you to share how you started your practice, what it meant to you. Do you use things like apps? 5 minutes, really? Is that all it takes? Or did you have to work up to an hour to really see the benefits?
I don't think the longest meditation, I've been practicing meditation for, maybe 25 years now. And I think the longest I've done is maybe an hour one time and maybe 30 minutes a few times. Typically, my current practice is about 15 minutes, but then it was really no more than 5. And yes, I found guided meditations through apps to be vital. I couldn't do it myself. All right. It was even now, thoughts enter in and you have to redirect. And I really have found that this practice, it's not about absence, it's about redirection. And having a very simple, there's so many apps. Back in the day, you had to find something like maybe on Apple Music or somewhere, not even Apple Music. I'd go to the quote New Age bookstore and find a CD that I would put into my CD player and my computer. That's how it was, honestly. But now, again, there's so many apps that are free, that are accessible. If you have whatever, Spotify, Apple Music, you can find things on there as part of your subscriptions. And yes, just those 5 minutes, and I think the research bears this out, is transformative in every single aspect of your life. And in particular, if you're struggling to overcome a challenge, it'll give you that foundation to once again have that quiet confidence to move past or through that challenge. Intention setting comes from that too. That the combination of the journal and the meditation solidifies the intention for it to become actualized.
And do you want to say a little bit more about how you set intentions? It's just like affirmation statements?
Yeah, but it can definitely be affirmation statements. I find that those intentions or affirmations come from journaling. And then so once that thing, that phrase, that word comes forward through that, physical, intellectual, mental, spiritual process of journaling, that word or phrase is something that I will sit with. And I recommend using I am statements. I am a doctoral candidate. I am someone completing their doctoral degree. Those sort of active, present affirmation, intention statements that get solidified often at the end of the meditation. So having the meditation, and then when you're in that state of clarity and calm, plant that intention or affirmation, and that it just becomes part of your DNA. You can't escape it at that point.
Research really does bear that it changes the neural pathways.
Yeah.
Which I think is so cool. And it might be something as simple as I am smart or I can do this. Let the intention come, the one that's right for you. But Scott, as you know, I'm a huge believer in meditation, not only from my personal experience, but because of what the research does suggest happens. And I love that you shared you used apps I love that you shared it's not about completely clearing the mind, because I think a lot of people who are drawn to higher education have very active minds. They're always thinking. And I remember sharing with my meditation coach, decades ago, about how I felt like I was terrible at this. I could never get that calm, clear mind. And he said, well, you just have active meditations. And just that little reframe made me go, okay, maybe I can do this. And I also love that you shared that after you're getting a hold of your time, because again, a lot of people will say, well, I don't have time for meditation. But one of my favorite sayings is, if you think you don't have time for a 20-minute meditation, why don't you try an hour one? Because it really will reveal the truth of your schedule and where you should be putting your time and all those things, right? It really is a transformative technique.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think bonus for doctoral students, if you are under stress, it's difficult to think at the level that you need to think at, right? So if you're under stress, your amygdala is overactive, you're not gaining access to your prefrontal cortex, and that's what you need when you're reading these research articles and writing. So meditation will give you benefits, not just in terms of creating your intention statements to bring you closer to your goal here, but to actually make the process so much smoother.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I mean, if there's one piece of advice I'd have for a doctoral student that is struggling to complete, doubts their ability to complete, and even those that have full confidence in their ability to complete, it's to engage some type of stillness practice that provides a level of self-care that I believe will facilitate that completion. There's so many, you mentioned the research around predictors of online doctoral success. There's so many ingredients that contribute to success. But first of all, foundationally, it's you. And it's the whole concept of put on your own oxygen mask first, which makes no sense, especially for those of us that are caregivers, parents, do any type of work that involves other people. We're, I think, often trained to believe that it's others first, us second. And if we do ourselves first, that's a selfishness that is counter to that work that we're doing. And instead, the whole purpose of putting on our own oxygen mask first is so we can do the work that we want to do, the work that we feel we need to do. And so when we do these practices, when we do that self-care, that's why I think it's a good idea to do it first thing in the morning before other distractions come into play, even before you put your feet on the floor, is to really immediately go into this mode of setting the intention for the day. It creates a sense of that quiet confidence, that assurance, the energy, the internalized belief that you can, in fact, accomplish the goal that you've set out for yourself.
And when you take just a little bit of time to invest in yourself, it really does pay off.
It's amazing.
Dr. Burrus, thank you for spending time with us tonight. This was the first webinar that was pre-recorded because Dr. Burrus and myself are away at a conference, but join us next month when Dr. Zimmerman gives a presentation on preparing for your oral defense. Be sure to follow us on your favorite social media so you can be informed of events just like this one, and I look forward to connecting with you next month.
Thank you.